What is going on? Welcome to the Second with Strength podcast, wherever you're at. Grateful you're listening today. And as always, spending your valuable seconds with me. One disclaimer today. It is Sunday afternoon. My kids and my wife are upstairs. There is a good chance you're going to hear fighting, bickering, one son bugging the other son or the other kids. There is probably going to be water flushing through the pipes. Anything could happen today, and it's also summer break, so just buckle up for the next 2 to 3 months of interruptions and noises that you wouldn't necessarily always hear on the podcast, but that's life. I am a father of 4, first and foremost, and what you're going to get on this podcast, at least for the next 4 months, is probably or 3 months is probably just some noise and some kids, and that's the way it goes. So anyway, today we're going to talk about our emotions and really why you are not your emotions. And I think what happens is, well, first of all, let's talk about us. What makes us us? And what I really want to get into, though, is our emotions and why, I don't know, sometimes we embody our feelings and what we're going to do about that. But what really makes us us, there's a few things that really make you, that make me. Some of these things are things that we can control, things that we can fix, and some of these things aren't. Some of the things that make us us are things that we can't control at all. And so, but those things, when we think about the things that make us us, there's a handful of things. One is our genetics, where you're at, physical, psychological traits, your temperament, your personality, your parents, where you came from, those sorts of things. Those are the genetics, and they're just ingrained in us. They're a part of us. But I think that sometimes people think that our genetics are us, and that's what makes us us, and we can't change because of them. And I just don't think that's true. I think that it's a piece of us. Yes, it's something that you may have to manage through, and we come from such different diverse backgrounds in this world, which is what makes this world so beautiful, is that we all come from these different backgrounds and these different genetic lineages and whatnot. But it is a piece of who we are. So we've got our genetics, our physical, psychological traits, the things that make us us from that perspective. You've got social factors that weigh into the fiber, the core of who you are. Your family, your cultural background, your community. These are things that were kind of handed to you. They were given to you. You can't really change them necessarily. You can, I guess, change your circumstances in a sense. You can change where you're at. You can change where you're physically located. You can let go of some relationships in your life, even if that's family. But for the most part, I want you to think of this social factors as family and cultural background. Those are things that you were given to them. You did not choose them. They chose you, or you were, it's just the way the apple fell from the tree. You ended up with the family you ended up with, good, bad, or indifferent. It doesn't really matter for this conversation, but it is part of what makes you you. So you've got your genetics, you've got your social factors, and then the third is your psychological factors, the thoughts, the emotions, the behaviors that you have. These are things that we do choose. We choose the behaviors, we choose the psychological factors, the thoughts, our emotions. We get to choose these things and dictate them, and we get to decide because of that, because of the choice that is, we get to decide who we are based on that, right? So regardless of the genetics, regardless of the social factors, regardless of those things that we didn't get to choose, that just happened, regardless of those things, we do get to choose our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And we think about our behaviors and how we can manage those as we think about what makes us us and our emotions and moving forward is those are we get to adjust those things through our habits. We get to adjust those things through, starting small, setting goals, identifying what are the things that motivate you, coming up with your why. I think if you think of a lot of personal development, or you think about some of those, we talk about your why. What's your reason? What's the reason that you are going to push forward? What's the reason you're going to move forward and kind of continue to drive towards your goals? What is the, when motivation's lacking, what do you fall back on that gets you going again? What is that thing that pushes you forward? What is your why? For some people, it's your family. For some people, it's faith. For some people, it's financial reasons. What is the why that pushes you? For me, when I changed my habits and starting getting back into shape, and I was not that person for a really long time in my life, but when I decided to do that, it came with setting goals, starting small, just starting in general, But once I started feeling good and I continued with consistency, the reason I never went back to who I was before or the reason I kept going is because I never wanted to go back to who I was before. I remembered that person who I was, and I don't want to know that person anymore. I met a new me, a new different me, and that's who I want to be. And so you think about who I am. Well, I'm this new me. I could go back to the old me, but I don't want to go back to the old me. So we've got our behaviors that we can change through habits, through consistency, and the person you want to be is on the other side of that. It's a matter of adjusting your behaviors just a little bit. The second piece of those psychological factors is our thoughts. I won't spend too much time on this. I did a podcast just a couple of weeks ago on your thoughts, but just know that your thoughts are impacted by you. You get to decide. And a lot of the thoughts that we think throughout the day are negative. Studies show that many of the thoughts we think are negative, but they don't have to be. We get to choose our thoughts. We can adjust that through gratitude. We can adjust our thoughts through just being aware of what we're thinking and when we're thinking of it and changing to something positive. We get to adjust that. And, one author, Trevor Moawad, who's a motivational speaker who sadly passed away, he talked about neutral thinking. Like, hey, you can't always think positive, and positivity isn't always going to help you. Negativity will always hurt you, but in the middle is this neutral thinking. Can you think neutrally so you can assess your situation and move forward? So we want to adjust our thoughts in any given situation to benefit us most. And when we don't do that, we can tend to go really negative. We can tend to think too negatively. And when we think too negatively, we are impacting who we are, and we are impacting what we can accomplish just through those negative thoughts. But the biggest one for me today, anyway, that I want to talk about is emotions. And what makes us are emotions. And one of the things that I think, and one of the biggest challenges I see that we face, is that we assume the identity of our negative emotions. So when we are feeling, when we're tired, or when we're sad, or when we're lonely, when we're depressed, when we're angry, we always say, I'm angry, I am depressed, I am lonely, I am tired, I am exhausted. And we assume this I am mentality, and we just shoulder that weight on us, and we just assume the identity of the feeling, the negative emotion that we're feeling in that moment. And when we do that, we start to live it and embody it, and we start limiting our positive outlook or positive view of ourselves because we are starting to embrace the emotions. And if you've been down this path in the past, you know that it's kind of hard to get out of it. If you are constantly telling yourself that you are tired, or that you're sad, or that you're angry, you start to live that. And you start to live that because you start to assume that identity in your life. That's the risk that we have there. And so we have to decide to adjust that. And one thing I would say is that I think it's interesting that we assume negative identities about ourselves, but we rarely assume positive identities about ourselves. Have you noticed that? If you say, I am tired, I am exhausted, I am angry, you say those negative words, and we internalize them as an I am statement. But rarely are we saying, I'm happy, I am happy, I am, whatever that positive emotion is. We rarely just embody that as an I am statement. We always say, yeah, I feel happy, I feel good right now, I feel grateful right now. Like we start to on the positive side call them emotions. On the negative side, we start to internalize them as who we are. And I think we need to be really, really careful about that in our lives. Arthur Brooks, who teaches a course on happiness at Harvard University, he says that emotions are just information. And I think that we have to recognize that in our lives, that emotion that we're feeling, whatever it is in any given moment, it's coming from a part of our brain that is for emotions, but it's not a decision-making part of our brain. It's just an emotional part of our brain. So we can't let the emotions that we're feeling in any given moment dictate our identity, because those emotions are temporary. All emotions are temporary, no matter what you're feeling, whether you're feeling, this is really important for teenagers if you're listening, or parents, if you have teenagers that you share I know a lot of parents share my podcasts and my social media with their teenagers. I really want to make sure that you understand this. The emotion that you're feeling in any given second, in any given moment, is temporary. It's not going to last. And that's, on the upside, the positive, the happy, those those joyful feelings that you're feeling, they're not going to last either. And those negative feelings, that depression, sad, frustrated, anxious, those feelings as well, they're not going to last either. They are going to pass, and we always come back to equilibrium in the moment. And so what we have to recognize is that if emotions are just information, then one, we don't have to act on them. We don't have to act on anything that we are feeling in any given moment. And we have to recognize that those emotions don't become our identity. They don't become who we are, because they are temporary feelings. They are temporary emotions. And so the biggest thing that I think that we can do about that today, that you can start making that change. And it's funny because I had this conversation with my wife. We were driving to a baseball tournament for my youngest son, and we started talking about emotions, and we started talking about, feelings and the things that we were feeling. And I mentioned this to her about, that we identify with our negative emotions, but we don't identify with our positive emotions. We started talking about the feeling of being tired. And I'm coming off of a little bit of a stretch where I've been traveling, did some speaking events. We've got this baseball tournament, kind of just some back-to-back low sleep, kind of moments in my life. And I said, it's just so easy to say I'm tired. And then we started assuming that identity of tired, instead of just switching really quick. And you can do this in like this instant. You can do it right now. You can just start saying, instead of I am tired, you can start saying I feel tired. I feel fatigued. I feel angry. I feel depressed. I feel lonely. I feel sad. And when you start to say I feel instead of I am, you start to separate your identity versus the emotion that you're feeling in the moment. And if it's just an emotion, you start to recognize and be aware of it, that you can, one, change it, two, outlast it. And once you recognize it, you can, when you're aware enough that you can change those emotions and outlast those emotions, it brings you back to center so quickly that you can then process whatever's going on in your life and make that next best decision to move forward. Because that's what it comes down to. I talk a lot about directionful growth, or, if we are aware of our situation, then we have direction in our growth. That's what we need to do from our emotion standpoint, because our emotions are not us. Our emotions are just emotions. Our emotions are not our identity, no matter if you've felt tired in the past, if you've been angry, if you've been frustrated, if you've been bitter, if you've been whatever that emotion is. It is not you. It's just a feeling. And that feeling will last. And I'm not saying that the feeling's not real, because all feelings are real. And I actually believe that we should not be suppressing our feelings. We should be feeling our feelings, because I believe that we were given all of our feelings so that we feel them. And we were given all of our feelings so that we can express them. But we need to be conscientious of what we're feeling so that we can be conscientious of how we express them, and recognize that no matter what we're feeling, it is not our identity. It's just something we're feeling in that moment. And so if you, if you've been struggling with this, then, or you've been feeling or harboring or maybe feeling like you've been becoming something or one of your emotions, and you've been feeling it more and more frequently, I would venture to guess it's because you've been internalizing that sentiment, that emotion, that feeling, and you've been making it maybe subconsciously a part of your identity, instead of just recognizing it and calling it out as it is, and just saying it's an emotion that you're feeling in that time. And you could feel emotions for a while. It's not like it's an emotion that just passes within any given second. Sometimes emotions linger, sometimes emotions stay. But when we recognize them as emotions, then we can start regulating. Then we can start moving beyond them. So I hope this helps you today. Focus on calling your emotions what they are. They're a feeling. They're not who you are. Focus on recognizing that on the upside of your emotions, the positive sides, that sometimes we always just call them feelings instead of internalizing them, right? Like let's focus on shifting that pendulum a little bit so that we can err on the side of who we want to become, because who you are is largely a choice. Yes, we cannot change our circumstances. We can't change our genetics. We can't change our social factors, but we can always change our thoughts. We can always change our emotions, and we can always change our behaviors. Those three things make up such a large component of who you are and who I am, that knowing that we have the power to change them gives us ultimate power in our life, because it means that where you are and maybe even who you might have become up until this point is not who you have to be in the long run. You get to choose that, but it does take a choice. It takes recognizing those emotions, changing some habits, and altering your thoughts to be on the more positive side or be on the more productive side. I don't even know how I'd say positive. I'd say productive to where you want to be. So I hope this helps you. Wherever you are, it really does help me if you leave a positive rating review on the show. It helps get this show out to more people. I want to help as many people as possible, and that starts with ratings and reviews. If you wouldn't mind taking 1 second of strength and going to do that. And it also comes with sharing this with people that you love. Share it with your family, your teenagers, your friends. Share it with people who need to hear this message, because I believe that these little snippets of goodness, nuggets of goodness, are going to help other people, because they've helped me a ton in my life, and I hope they're helping you. So hope that helps, and I will leave you the same way I always leave you. Go find your 1 second of strength and be happy.